Welcome to the Catalyst Sale Podcast with Mike and Mike. Sales is a thinking process. This podcast will help you learn about what works in sales, how to hone your skills, and increase your success. I'm your host, Jody Mayberry, and I'm here with Mike Simmons. Hello, Mike.
Hey, Jody. How are you?
I am doing great, and we've got such an exciting guest today calling in from Barcelona. So we're crossing the water again. We've got Rob Käll, the co-founder and CEO of Cein, Inc. So tell us about Rob.
Well, Rob is someone who I've just met recently. He and I first got connected through a couple of members of his team. One member of the team was following us on the podcast, and one thing led to another. And as I started to look into Cein, I was surprised that I had not come across Rob before because of the areas of focus that he has with his business related specifically to using data to help impact results. We've also talked about AI before and some of the skepticism that we have around AI. And the skepticism is not on fit and whether or not it's something that we should all be excited about, but more about who's actually doing it well today. Because a lot of people talk about AI and may not necessarily be doing it. A lot of people who are doing things in AI may not be as public as we'd like them to be. So really looking forward to the discussion with Rob today. Rob, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, guys. Pleasure to meet you, Jody and Mike. And again, thanks for having me here.
So I'm going to start with an easy question. Why Cein, Inc.? How did you come up with the name?
Oh, Cein means 100 in Spanish. As you guys just mentioned, I'm calling in from Barcelona today. We have our data science and product development team here, and we also have an office in Dallas. But we wanted to create something. Cein means 100 in Spanish, and we wanted to create something that represents 100, reaching 100% on your test, giving 100%, or doing something 100 times better than we had done before. So we thought that was a great name. And then, of course, I came here to Barcelona and went into the grocery store, and I noticed that Cein is also the name of the toilet paper here. So that was a little bit of a setback. But, our focus is on artificial intelligence and sales productivity. So hopefully there's no confusion.
Well, not too much of a setback because now you've got a good story.
All right.
So tell me a little bit about how you got into data and why data is important to you and why leveraging data and leveraging technology to help people do things better is something that's important to you.
Right. So that's a long story, but I'll try to condense it down. But I've basically been an entrepreneur for the last 17, 18 years, and I have done several different startups prior to Cein. One was in real estate, and our big breakthrough in real estate was that we were able to aggregate data from MLSs across the United States, and we ended up being the largest aggregator, and we got some really large deals. So we powered the second largest real estate website in the United States and many other things. And the other startup was in travel and vacation rentals and bookings. And we basically built that up with booking data and transactions so that it exceeded over $1 billion at the end of when I left it. And in both cases, data was really the key to our success, to analyze the data, to understand exactly what was happening with users visited our sites when they tried to book and so forth. And I spent a lot of time analyzing data. But at that point, unlike today, the tools to artificial intelligence with that data were very crude. And it was really just more of kind of Excel analysis type of stuff. But, in the last few years, the technology has matured so much for artificial intelligence. And now we can do something even more exciting.
One of the things that you've talked about in blog posts that you've put out there, one of the comments is replace hunches with facts. Another one is see beyond your KPIs. Can you talk to that a bit more for the audience and how hunches impact what we do and where you can get factual information and how this ties into what you do?
Right. So those are two great things. And I don't know if I can tell you this whole thing succinctly, but our motto is measure what matters.
Yep.
And what I mean by that is that you probably already have a myriad of KPIs for your sales operations dashboards and so forth. And some of those numbers go up and some of those numbers go down. And what do they really mean? And how do they impact your overall results? That is really hard to determine today for most sales leaders. And what we wanted to do was to measure the things that really matter. And we basically came up with ways to remove the hunches and the facts around things like team mood, which has always been a very kind of gut feeling type of thing, or activity level, which has been another very gut feeling level. People calling enough, or people making enough efforts. People probably many times had a number of calls made, but anybody that's been trying to incentivize against activity and so forth know that those numbers are easily gamed, and people do things that don't make any sense in order to make their numbers, right? So what we wanted to do was to use AI to measure all of those things and then distill it down to things that really matter. Like, are you getting the activity level that is meaningful? Is your team happy? Is the quality of your leads really good? So that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, one of the stories I like to tell around that is I can say that I went to the gym 20 times in the last month, but just because I went there doesn't mean I actually worked out. It doesn't mean I actually moved weight around or did some cardio or did the work. So what we're saying here, what you're describing here is it's one thing to have these check the box type metrics that are easy to measure and easy to game, like activities, number of outbound calls, number of emails sent, number of demos conducted. What type of data do you look at to go beyond just the vanity activity metrics?
Your example with going to the gym but not working out is a perfect example, right? And the way we are solving this stuff, the data that we get from CRM systems is, first off, we know that data is never perfect. We have never encountered any customer that has perfect CRM data. The first thing we do is to account for that the data is incomplete, inconsistent, delayed, and so forth. And we build artificial intelligence models around those problems. And then secondly, we analyze the content of those records. And we use things like natural language processing to determine whether someone actually engaged with the customer or just left a message, for example, or whether the customer called you versus you calling them. Because all of those things have signal that then determine whether you're making progress towards your goal of converting the opportunity or whatever your objective is in this particular context. So we apply, not just one little algorithm, but a series of things to enrich the quality of those records. And then we apply what people call in the data science world regression models around that. And that is essentially the ability to predict what's going to happen in the future when you see these patterns from the past.
So you talked about natural language processing and you mentioned AI. I want to get a little bit deeper into natural language processing. For those of us who are listening to this who may not be familiar with natural language processing, how would you define it and how would you actually describe it practically?
Sure. So the old way of kind of doing computer science and the way I started and was kind of the factor was that you just looked for, strings maybe, or like looking for a string like called John or whatever, right? But that only captures the particular phrases that you have put into your system. In natural language processing, you understand that call John and talk to John and John reached out to me. Those things mean more or less the same thing. Mm-hmm. And then you can apply meaning to the text content that you have also. Or in some cases, it can be even done on spoken content. So it allows you to extract additional meaning. You can also do things like sentiment analysis. So you look for whether this was a positive conversation or a negative conversation. Or you can do things like extracting specific key phrases like contract negotiation versus objections and so forth. And when you have all of that information at your disposal, you can then look for patterns. So it's not always, what's interesting is that, like, for example, if you look at sentiment, positive versus negative, it's not that a deal will automatically go through if every conversation is positive. In many cases, it requires some objection handling, some concerns to be addressed before you get to the final thing. And these are the types of things that we're uncovering as we're analyzing millions of records.
It's really interesting to see how... I don't know that interesting is the right word. I'll say I'm optimistic based on a lot of the activity that's happening in the marketplace on what the future holds here and getting out of the perception of how things are going versus the reality of being able to analyze or go through large sets of data. There are a number of times where I'll wrap up a call with a client and feel like the call went really well, but I could have somebody else on my team be on the call and they could highlight areas where I might have missed or things I might not have caught up on. Is that something that natural language processing and AI will help us with going forward?
Yes. And it's really interesting you say the word optimistic, because in many cases, people hear about artificial intelligence and they think about robots and they think about everybody's going to lose their job and so forth. What we are looking at in sales is not to replace a salesperson, through some little chatbot. Obviously, that could happen in an extremely simple thing, but the type of companies that we are helping are creating complex enterprise sales where typically you need to build trust. You need to have a lot of back and forth before a deal has to close. And what we're delivering is essentially a coach, a mentor, someone that can truly help you up your game so you can continuously be better and better. And you're getting that continuous feedback that if you have a great manager or a coach or something like that, you can get. No one has a coach that listens to every sales conversation. No one has a coach that goes back and truly analyzes what has happened in the past. Like you just mentioned, that you get feedback from a friend or something like that. With this type of technology, you can get that thing, and it can happen continuously, and it can happen automatically. So that's the big benefit for using these types of tools today.
So how about that talks about it at the rep level. How about when you start thinking about it from a sales leadership perspective and you say, how can I help my team be more effective based on this large amount of data that I've got access to? What do you see happening in the future there?
That's a great question. And I have been fortunate to work with some awesome sales leaders. I should just do full disclosure. I have never had the job as VP of sales. I have been technical founder. I've been the CTO, and I have for the last 10, 15 years been the CEO of companies. So I know how important sales are. And of course, I worked hand in hand with some great people. But one thing I've found from sales leaders is that they tend to revert back to their playbook and the playbook that they were successful in the last company. And that can many times be a mistake because that playbook assumed that there was a specific problem. For example, that they were not managing activities correctly in the company before the executive came in, or because they had a broken employee engagement system. People were pissed off about something when they were working, or because the marketing department was not delivering things. So they then go and say, I'm going to do the same thing. The reality is that every single company is unique. Every situation is unique. And if you want to improve your sales productivity, you need to address the low-hanging fruit first. And that is not the same in each company. So we are trying to always look at things from a high level, on an aggregate level, and say, here are your key issues that you can move the needle on right now. And in most cases, they center around putting the right resources to the right people.
And really what you're talking about is a partnership between technology and the human. So it's the taking the experience that I might have from previous engagements or previous working environments that I've been in, general questions that come from taking a creative approach to solving problems, but then also being able to take the data that the machine is able to push out so that I can make more informed decisions or I guess I would look at it as have access to insight at a volume that I may not be able to access through other means.
Right. That's the whole thing. Humans are excellent at picking up patterns and seeing things. That's what makes humans intelligent, and they can do that. But we are also subject to our own biases and reverting back to things that they have worked in the past that may not be right for this thing. And we also have a limited capacity to analyze a lot of data. And those are the types of things that computers are not subject to. So when you get the combination of these computer provided advice or mentorship or prescriptions, as sometimes we call them, and you combine that with human intelligence, you can very quickly realize a new level of performance that you did not have before.
Very good. So what does the future look like? Let's say I'm skeptical on AI and skeptical on how it might fit in my business. How do you overcome that skepticism? And how would you describe what the future of this space looks like?
Well, this is going to sound a little bit over the top and hypey and so forth, but my sincere belief is that artificial intelligence and data science will fundamentally change everything that we're doing over the next 10 to 15 years, not just in sales or in self-driving cars or the examples you tend to hear right now, but in everything, because we have so many new ways to collect data through our smartphones and IoT devices and so forth. And we have the capacity to store all this data in a whole new way. And then we are now maturing the the technology that makes decisions or recommendations or predictions around that. And that's what the AI piece is. When you're applying all that stuff in a concerted effort, you're just realizing so much value and so much more things that used to be fuzzy and hard to understand become much clearer. And you'll see that across all industries and all type of things. And I am super excited to be working at it. I wish I'd started, we started a company in 2016. I wish I'd started in 2013 or 2014. But this opportunity exists right now to build these types of businesses. And there's a lot of people, very smart people, much smarter than me, that are working on these types of things. And you'll see a lot of investment in the space. And that's because of this massive opportunity in front of us. Just one more tidbit. A report from IDC came out a few months ago where they put a value of adding AI just to CRM of over $1 trillion.
How did they get to that valuation?
You got to have them that. No, but they did a pretty significant, it was co-sponsored by Salesforce.com. Yep. So they got data from Salesforce.com. They looked at various inefficiencies that are existing today that they saw that AI could help solve. And they know that a tremendous amount of economic activity goes through CRM systems today. So just small improvements in productivity, small improvements in efficiency in those things yield tremendous amount of additional economic value. And in that case, the number in them was $1 trillion.
And I think that's a key point. It's small improvements. It's incremental improvements. And I think, for those of you out there who either are carrying a bag or are interested in sales or are interested in supporting people in a sales role or just are interested in doing your jobs better, if you can incrementally improve day after day, you'll be in a much better place a year from now than where you are today. And so one of the things that I'm optimistic about when it comes to AI and machine learning and natural language processing and this whole space that I really am just starting to scratch the surface on is the practical application across multiple businesses, multiple roles, just helping us be more efficient as humans. But one question that comes to mind is, how do you, when you get into this scenario where there's a lot of optimism and there's a lot of excitement, you then have a lot of people following with a lot of marketing noise. So, how can we as non-practicing professionals in AI or machine learning or natural language processing, how can we see the signal through the noise when we start looking into AI or looking into machine learning?
That's a great question. And I can only explain how we are looking at this stuff. We have a very, very simple measurement for success. We look at your current sales productivity, and then we look at your sales productivity after you've started using some of our tools. And getting just a few percentage points of increase in sales productivity. And remember, sales productivity doesn't mean that you're doing a lot of new investment to increase your sales team. It means getting more out of your existing team, using the same resources, the same marketing budget, and so forth. When we are getting that increase, then we know we've succeeded. And when we can very easily deliver a tremendous ROI on the investment in our product and so forth. And if we have time, I'd love to give some examples on how you can get that type of immediate gain from something like AI.
I would love to hear examples.
Right. So one example, and for the sales leaders in this thing, you probably recognize this. You have two reps. You have Bob and you have Sue. Bob sold for 100K last quarter and Sue sold for 80K. So the old way of looking at stuff is, well, Bob is awesome. He beat his quota, and Sue, she needs some help, right? But with AI, you can go in and measure things in a whole new way. So you can measure exactly what the value of the leads and opportunities that both of them received. And you find that Bob received $50,000 worth of leads and Sue only received $20,000 worth of leads. So Sue actually added a lot more value with her time during that last quarter. And a super easy way to increase the team's overall productivity is just to reallocate some of the leads and opportunities that Bob received to Sue. And because she is providing value at a higher level, you realize these 2, 3, 4% of increased productivity just right there, not spending another dollar on anything. It's just that. And many of the people, you described your audience, many people are technology founders, many people are sales leaders in SaaS companies and so forth. If you're selling a high gross margin software product, getting a few percentage points more of sales productivity out of your existing team has tremendous impact on your growth rate, and has a tremendous impact on your capital efficiency, and it has a tremendous impact on your overall enterprise value if you're going back to raise more money or looking for an exit or something. So it's like improving sales productivity is the ultimate, medicine for your business. It just helps you get on steroids, basically.
And I think this really highlights that piece that you talked about earlier on measuring what matters, because so many people get lost in the idea of, I need to focus on top of funnel activity. I need to focus on, my sales team would be more effective if they had more leads, or my sales team would be more effective if they were talking to the right people, or my sales team would be more effective if whatever. It's using tools like this where you can start to get into the reality of the data. Am I on the right track, Rob?
Yeah. And so you nailed it on the head there. And the answer is, yeah, in some cases, the sales team would be better if you got better leads. In our case, the problem is something else. Yep. And the way we're looking at this stuff is that we're trying to get a 360-degree view of your sales environment. So we're looking at three distinct areas. One is your lead and pipeline quality. One is your people or rep attributes, and one is your macro environment. So I'll give some examples on each one. Lead and pipeline would be things like fit and interest of your leads. You can have great fit leads, but they're cold. In other words, they have low interest. Then you have SDRs or other people that can hopefully get them more interested. But if your marketing team is generating a lot of bad fit leads, in other words, they are in the wrong industry, they are the wrong size and so forth, there's not much your sales team can do about them, and you need to essentially reallocate your marketing efforts. On the rep side, there's a lot of interesting things. There we have some new ways to measure things that we know are pretty unique. So for example, we look at things like work ethic, and we can figure out what a rep's work ethic is. Not just how many calls there are, but the true effort level that they are providing, closing ability, product knowledge, and even team mood, where we are measuring the aggregate quote unquote happiness level of the team. And we have some ways to figure that out. And the third one, and it's like I told you guys that I'm calling from Barcelona. So a few years ago, I sold another business and we ended up buying a competing business here in Barcelona. And I was a general manager for it. And I was watching the numbers for the sales team here in Barcelona, and I had made a projection. And then, of course, August came. And I thought the numbers would continue the same as they had done before. And instead, they just sank through there was nothing happened that month. Because in Barcelona, you have an extreme seasonality during the summer. And these were things like seasonality, competitive pressures. Those are the macro environment variables. The ones that you can't really control, it still affects your business. So when you have the 360 view, you have lead and pipeline, you have rep quality, and you have the macro factors. And then you can start making more accurate predictions and deal with what really you need to address in your sales organization.
Great examples. Can you talk a little bit? I'm going to kind of shift the discussion from the AI, machine learning, data side and go into more of your experience in operating inside startups, inside a startup environment, and just lessons learned and things that you've applied now within Cein as you've built this organization. What are some of the things that you know now that you wish you would have known 5 years ago or 10 years ago as you've gone through other parts of your journey?
Okay. Here's one that most people don't say. I mean, there's obviously a lot of things that people always say: hire great people, find a good market, and so forth. So I'm not going to repeat those.
Good.
Instead, I'm going to say this one. You're going to feel like you're failing the entire time you're building your business. Every day, there's a new problem, I don't know if I can say it on your product, that storm hitting you, right? And it never feels like you're succeeding as you're building your business, because there's just an endless array of problems that are hitting you. But if you're just making progress on those, solving those problems and moving on, and then of course you encounter new problems right after that, but you just keep solving them and solving them and solving them, eventually you'll have success. And what happens is that people recognize, hey, you stuck with it. You really continue to deliver something of value despite all of these setbacks you may or may not have shown to the outside world. Sometimes those are public, sometimes they're just private. But in the end, you build something that withstood all of that stuff. And that's really, when you talk to entrepreneurs, on a more honest level, you hear those stories all the time. But when you read a story about, oh, this guy just built his business and sold it for $1 billion, they rarely talk about those types of things. They just talk about a great idea and that's it, right?
Yeah, they don't talk about the real tough stuff. So how do you what are some of the things that you would do to help maintain focus?
Well, my business partner would tell me that I'm not as focused as I should be because I am always looking for new opportunities and so forth. But I have two great business partners that do keep me grounded and sets me back on the focus and so forth. But at this point, I think, because I have already done it a few times, I'm more used to the fact that you can't get distracted with every new idea. You can't, just chase every new shiny thing. You have to say no to certain opportunities that come your way and so forth. So at this point, it's more experience and having great partners and stuff like that. In the beginning, I just made the same mistake that everybody else did and just went off after this customer that was not a good fit or thought that I should expand into this industry, even if I hadn't really done well in the first industry yet and so forth. So hopefully I'll make fewer of those mistakes today, but I'm sure I'll still make some.
Well, I can tell you personally, we have not yet come across a new mistake or a mistake that we were the first ones to ever make. So the takeaway there, I think for everybody is don't fail alone. Ask questions, engage with your mentors, engage with your coaches, engage with business partners. Leveraging their perspective can really make those tough times easier or at least bearable. The other question I've got, Rob, is you've built teams and as you've added many professionals to your organization, how have you what have you done to maintain the culture or continue to keep a culture going inside the organization and communicate the vision of the founder throughout the organization? What have you done that's worked well? And if you have a story on where you failed there, we would love to hear that as well.
Sure. Here's another honest answer. In the beginning, I was a tech geek, 15 to 20 years ago, and all I cared about was the computers and did they run and so forth. And I didn't care about that stuff at all, and therefore had failures related to culture and the team composition and so forth. I learned a lot over the last 10, 15 years, and I know that an organization only works when you have an excellent culture and everybody are aligned to a common goal. So what did I do today? I think is spending a lot of time communicating. I have town halls with my team. We have a culture of transparency in the organization. We say, here are bad news, here's good news. We share it all. We try to be as open as we can. I spend a lot of time doing fun things with the team. We have outings. We have, all of those things. Those are sometimes what people think about as culture, but that's just one piece of it. And then you also spend time on one-on-one conversations with your team members, and not just with your direct reports, but with everybody in the organization. And, find out what's important to them. Make sure if you have a small team of 100 people, there's no reason why you should not know something about every single person that works in your organization, what their kids' names are, what their hobbies are, and so forth. I mean, of course, when you have 2,000 people, that's not possible. But as a startup founder, it's your obligation to care about every single member in your team and make sure that they understand what you care about in terms of building a great company and so forth.
Thank you. And I think that really highlights, again, this convergence of, or the importance of and convergence of the human aspect of what we do and the technology aspect of what we do. It's not just ones and zeros, and I know coding's moved beyond ones and zeros. As we wind down, I kind of want to bring things back to the sales training side or the sales side of things here. And in a recent blog post that you had on Medium, you talked about the importance of making sure your sales team gets proper training. And you highlight that training should be more than an afterthought. Can you expand on that a bit for us and for the audience?
Sure. It starts with a general premise or idea that you should know as much as possible as you can about the stuff that you're working with. I have sometimes been accused of explaining what I'm doing too much, but I really feel like if you're a salesperson, you really need to know your industry, your products. And this is, again, some of the stuff that we are measuring, and we know they are tightly correlated to sales success. A person that can explain to a prospect their product, how it changes the industry, the value proposition is obviously going to be much more effective than someone that just repeats some canned catchphrases or whatever the marketing department provided them with. So that's one piece. The other piece is just that, people care about training. And that's another thing that we're measuring in our product. How was training for you, John, this month? Did you receive the the coaching and the information you needed. And if you don't, probably it's going to affect your overall satisfaction with the company. And obviously, having engaged and satisfied employees that are not leaving you for another company that provides better training is a critical thing, because nothing is more expensive than replacing a great salesperson.
I couldn't have said it better. Replacing a good salesperson is very expensive, and as is keeping a bad salesperson or keeping the wrong person inside your organization. Well, Rob, thank you very much for the time. I'm going to steal Jody's thunder a bit, and I'm going to ask you if you could just help people get a better understanding of where they can find out more about what you're doing, what Cein Inc. is doing, and if they'd like to connect with you, what the best way to do so is.
Sure. So I love to connect with people. I'm on both on Twitter and LinkedIn. In both cases, my handle is Robert Käll, one word, ROBERTKALL. So please feel free to follow me or connect with me via LinkedIn. Our product and website can be found at Cein.ai. So that's CIEN.ai. And there you can find more information about our product and our insights, the blog post that you referenced several times, Mike, in our conversation. And hopefully you find some content that's of interest there.
Rob, thank you so much. This has been a great conversation. I'm so glad you were able to join us. And thank you, Mike. And thank you for listening to the Catalyst Sale Podcast.